Story Number 1. The Mirror Truck. Jake Morrison had been hauling freight across the Midwest for 17 years, and he prided himself on never missing a delivery deadline. On a cold February night in 2019, he was driving his Peterbilt through rural Nebraska on Highway 83, carrying a load of agricultural equipment to Scottsbluff. The road was empty, just endless stretches of frozen farmland under a moonless sky. His CB radio crackled with occasional chatter from other drivers, but mostly it was just him and the hum of his engine. Around Tucson a.m., he noticed headlights in his mirrors. Another semi had pulled up behind him, matching his speed exactly. Jake thought nothing of it at first. Truckers often traveled in pairs for safety on these isolated routes. But after 20 minutes, the truck was still there, maintaining the exact same distance. Jake adjusted his speed, slowing down to 60, then speeding up to 70. The truck behind him matched every change perfectly, staying precisely 3 truck lengths back. He tried radioing the driver. "Hey, good buddy, you're sitting pretty close back there. Everything all right?" Nothing but static. Jake squinted at his mirrors, trying to make out details of the truck, but the headlights were too bright. He could see it was a semi with a sleeper cab, but no company markings were visible. The strange thing was how perfectly it mirrored his movements. When he drifted slightly left, it drifted left. When he corrected right, so did the other truck. Jake's unease grew into genuine fear when he realized something impossible. The truck behind him was identical to his own. Same model Peterbilt, same configuration, same blue paint job he could barely make out between the headlights. He'd customized his truck with specific modifications: a chrome deer guard, LED light strips, a unique exhaust stack arrangement. The truck following him had all of them. His hands started shaking on the wheel. He grabbed his phone and held it up, trying to capture a photo in the mirror. When he looked at the screen, his blood went cold. The truck in the mirror had his license plate number. His exact plate. He could see his own company logo on the door. He was being followed by a perfect copy of his own truck. Jake floored the accelerator, pushing his rig up to 85 miles per hour. The mirror truck accelerated in perfect synchronization. He hit his brakes hard, slowing to 45. The other truck matched him instantly, maintaining that precise 3-length distance. It was like he was being followed by his own shadow made solid. He tried taking an exit, swerving at the last second onto a county road. The mirror truck followed flawlessly, as if it knew his decision before he made it. For 2 hours, Jake drove in panic through the Nebraska backroads, trying every trick he knew to lose his pursuer. Nothing worked. The mirror truck followed every turn, every speed change, every desperate maneuver. Jake noticed something else. When he glanced at his side mirror, he could see a driver in the other truck's cab. The figure wore the same red flannel shirt Jake was wearing. The same baseball cap. He couldn't see the face clearly, but the posture, the way the hands rested on the wheel. It was exactly like his own. As dawn broke, Jake pulled into a truck stop outside Alliance, Nebraska. He parked and sat trembling, watching his mirrors. The mirror truck pulled into a space directly behind him, perfectly aligned. Jake grabbed a tire iron from his toolbox and walked back, determined to confront whoever was driving. As he approached, he could see the truck in detail now. It was impossibly identical. Every scratch, every dent, every sticker on his windshield was replicated exactly. He reached for the driver's door handle. The moment his fingers touched the metal, the truck vanished. Not drove away, vanished. It didn't fade or disappear gradually. Between one blink and the next, it simply ceased to exist. Jake stumbled backward, dropping the tire iron. The parking space was empty. No tire marks, no oil stains, no evidence anything had ever been there. Jake finished his delivery that day, but he quit trucking the following week. He sold his Peterbilt to a company in Iowa and never drove professionally again. Sometimes, late at night, he still checks his rearview mirror obsessively. Terrified he'll see those headlights again, following at that perfect distance, mirroring every move he makes, driven by a version of himself that exists somewhere he can't explain. Story number 2. The station that wasn't there. Marcus Webb had been a long-haul driver for 12 years, specializing in overnight routes between Texas and Louisiana. In March 2021, he was hauling electronics from Houston to Shreveport on Highway 59, a route he'd driven at least 200 times. It was a routine run. Leave at 8 p.m., arrive by 4 a.m., unload, and head home. Marcus knew every truck stop, every rest area, every place to grab coffee along that stretch of road. Around midnight, his fuel gauge warned him he was running low. He'd planned to fill up at the pilot station in Nacogdoches, but he'd hit unexpected traffic earlier and burned more fuel than anticipated. The warning light glowed amber on his dash. Marcus did the math in his head. He had maybe 40 miles of fuel left, and Nacogdoches was 53 miles ahead. He'd need to find something closer. He'd never noticed a gas station between his current position and Nacogdoches before, but at 12:47 a.m. he saw lights ahead. A large, well-lit truck stop appeared on the right side of the highway, with multiple diesel pumps and a convenience store that looked modern and clean. The sign read Red River Fuel and Rest in bright neon letters. Marcus felt relieved. He must have driven past it hundreds of times during the day and just never noticed it at night. He pulled off the highway and into the station. The place was oddly empty. No other vehicles, no attendants visible through the store windows. But the pumps were running, digital displays glowing green with "Insert card to begin." Marcus climbed out of his cab, grateful for the stop. The air felt wrong somehow, too still, and there was an unusual smell he couldn't identify, something like ozone mixed with decay. He swiped his fuel card and began pumping diesel. The numbers on the display rolled forward normally, gallons increasing, price climbing. While the tank filled, Marcus walked toward the convenience store, hoping to grab coffee and use the restroom. The automatic doors opened as he approached. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed loudly, almost painfully bright. The shelves were fully stocked with snacks, drinks, and typical truck stop supplies. Everything looked normal, but there was no one behind the counter. "Hello?" Marcus called out. His voice echoed strangely, as if the building were much larger than it appeared. No response. He walked down one aisle, then another. The products on the shelves looked slightly off, brands he recognized, but the packaging seemed wrong. A Coca-Cola can had the logo positioned differently. A bag of chips had a flavor he'd never seen. The expiration dates on everything read dates that hadn't occurred yet. Some 6 months in the future, some 10 years ahead. He backed toward the exit, unease crawling up his spine. When he turned around, he froze. Through the front windows, he could see his truck at the pumps still fueling. But beyond his truck, the highway was gone. Where Highway 59 should have been, there was only darkness, not the darkness of night, but a complete void, an absence of anything. No road, no trees, no stars, just an empty black expanse that seemed to swallow light. Marcus ran outside, the fuel pump clicked off, tank full. He yanked the nozzle out and threw it aside, not bothering to hang it up properly. The void beyond the parking lot seemed to be getting closer, spreading like a slow flood. He could see the edge of the pavement ending sharply, just 30 feet from his truck, giving way to nothing. The highway behind him, the way he'd entered, no longer existed. He jumped into his cab and started the engine. His GPS showed his location in the middle of Lake Nacogdoches, which made no sense. The lake was 15 miles west of his actual position. The compass spun in circles. His cell phone showed no signal, and when he tried to check the time, the display flickered between 12:47 a.m. and 3:33 a.m., jumping back and forth randomly. Marcus threw the truck in gear and drove straight ahead toward where the highway should be, into the void. For a terrifying moment, everything went black. He couldn't see his hood, his mirrors, his dashboard, nothing. Then suddenly he was on Highway 59 again, driving normally. He checked his mirrors frantically. Behind him there was only empty road. No lights, no truck stop, no red. River, fuel, and rest. Just darkness and highway. When he reached Nacogdoches 10 minutes later, he pulled into the pilot station and checked his fuel gauge. It read completely full, just as it had when he'd left the Phantom station. His fuel card statement later showed no charge from that night. Marcus has driven that stretch of Highway 59 hundreds of times since then, always in daylight. He refuses to drive it after dark. He's never seen the Red River Fuel and Rest again, and when he's asked other drivers about it, none of them have ever heard of it. Story number 3. The Hitchhiker Who Knew. Daniel Cruz had a strict personal rule during his 15 years of trucking. Never pick up hitchhikers. He'd heard too many horror stories from other drivers, and the liability wasn't worth the risk. But on a rainy October night in 2018, driving through Montana on Interstate 90, he broke that rule. He'd been driving for 11 hours straight, exhausted, fighting to keep his eyes open. When he saw a man standing on the shoulder in the pouring rain, thumb out, something compelled him to stop. Later, he'd wonder if it was really his choice at all. The man who climbed into his cab was unremarkable. Middle-aged, wearing jeans and a gray jacket, water dripping from his dark hair. "Appreciate the ride," the man said, his voice quiet and oddly flat. "Name's Thomas." Daniel introduced himself and asked where Thomas was heading. "Same place you are," Thomas replied, which struck Daniel as strange since he hadn't mentioned his destination. Daniel was hauling machine parts to Billings, still 3 hours away. They drove in silence for a while, the only sounds the rhythmic thump of windshield wipers and the hiss of wet pavement under the tires. Daniel tried making conversation a few times, but Thomas gave short, cryptic answers. After about 20 minutes, Thomas spoke unprompted. "You're going to want to slow down in about 2 miles. There's going to be an accident." Daniel glanced at him. "What do you mean? How do you know?" Thomas stared straight ahead through the windshield. "You'll see. Just slow down." Something in his tone made Daniel's skin prickle. Against his better judgment, he eased off the accelerator. Exactly 2 miles later, around a curve, Daniel saw taillights swerving violently. A pickup truck had hydroplaned and crashed into the median barrier. Daniel slowed to a crawl, carefully navigating around the wreckage. The accident had clearly just happened. The driver was still inside, dazed but moving. Other vehicles were stopping to help. "How did you know?" Daniel demanded, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. Thomas didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his words chilled Daniel's blood. "Your daughter Emma called you 3 times today. You were too busy to answer. She wanted to tell you about her school play. She got the lead role." Daniel's heart hammered in his chest. He hadn't told Thomas anything about his family. His phone had been on silent all day, and yes, Emma had called 3 times. He'd meant to call her back during his next stop. "How the hell do you know that?" Daniel's voice came out sharp, edged with fear. "Your wife is going to call you in 17 minutes, Thomas continued, ignoring the question. "She's going to tell you her mother had a stroke. You'll need to turn around, head back to Missoula. You won't make it to Billings tonight." Daniel considered pulling over and forcing this stranger out of his truck, but something paralyzed him. He needed to know if Thomas was right, needed to prove this was some kind of trick. They drove in heavy silence. Daniel counted every minute on his dashboard clock. At the 17-minute mark exactly, his phone rang. The display showed his wife's name. His hand trembled as he answered on Bluetooth. His wife's panicked voice filled the cab. Her mother had collapsed at home. Stroke. The ambulance was taking her to Missoula Community Medical Center. Daniel needed to come home immediately. She couldn't handle this alone. He told her he'd turn around right away, ended the call, and stared at Thomas in horror. "What are you?" Daniel whispered. Thomas finally turned to look at him directly. In the dim light of the dashboard, his eyes appeared completely black, not just the pupils, but the entire eye like polished stones. "You've been driving too tired for weeks, Daniel. Next Tuesday, if you keep on like this, you're going to fall asleep at the wheel on Highway 12. You'll cross the center line at 3:42 a.m. and hit a minivan. There's a family inside, parents and 2 little girls. Everyone dies, including you." Daniel's blood turned to ice. "That's not... How do you..." "Take the next exit," Thomas instructed. "Turn around, go see your mother-in-law. And after this, Daniel, you need to start resting. Following the regulations. Sleeping when you're supposed to sleep. Because right now, you're headed toward Tuesday, and that family is headed toward you, and I'm very tired of watching that intersection." Daniel took the next exit, his mind reeling. He pulled into a rest area to turn around. "What are you?" he asked again. "Some kind of angel? A ghost?" "I'm what happens when the same tragedy repeats too many times in the same place," Thomas said softly. "I'm the echo of everyone who's died on this stretch of road from tired drivers. We're all here, Daniel, watching, trying to stop it from happening again. We can't always intervene, but tonight you pulled over. You let me in. So I can tell you, stop killing people, stop killing yourself." Daniel blinked, his eyes burning with exhaustion and tears. When he opened them, the passenger seat was empty. Thomas was gone. No sound of a door opening, no movement, just gone. The seat wasn't even wet from his rain-soaked clothes. Daniel drove back to Missoula that night, stayed with his wife for 3 days while her mother recovered. He started following his logbook religiously, never pushing past his hours, always resting when required. The following Tuesday, he wasn't anywhere near Highway 12 at 3:42 a.m. He was parked at a rest stop, sleeping soundly in his cab. He never picked up another hitchhiker, but sometimes, late at night on empty roads, he swears he sees Thomas standing on the shoulder in the rain, thumb out, waiting for the next driver who needs a warning. Story number 4. The Convoy of the Dead. Patricia Nguyen had been driving team routes with her husband for 8 years when he died of a heart attack in 2017. She'd taken 6 months off, then returned to solo driving, unable to imagine doing anything else with her life. By November 2020, she was hauling refrigerated goods along Interstate 80, a route that took her through the desolate stretches of Nevada where civilization felt like a distant memory. She preferred the loneliness now. It was easier than being reminded of the empty passenger seat. On a clear, cold night, somewhere between Winnemucca and Battle Mountain, Patricia's CB radio crackled to life with unusual chatter. Multiple drivers were talking about a convoy forming ahead, at least 15 trucks moving together. Patricia frowned. She hadn't passed that many trucks all night, and she'd been on this stretch of I-80 for 2 hours. "Breaker, breaker, this is Lotus Flower. Anyone got eyes on this convoy you're talking about?" she called out using her CB handle. A voice responded immediately, heavy with static. "They're about 10 miles ahead of your position, Lotus Flower. Big group, moving slow. 55 and a 65. You'll catch up soon." Patricia confirmed and kept driving, curious now. Sure enough, about 12 minutes later, she saw lights ahead. A long line of semis, all running tight together, maybe 1 or 2 truck lengths between them. As she closed the distance, something felt off. The trucks looked old, 1970s and 1980s models, the kind you'd see in museums or vintage truck shows. They had the classic long noses, chrome everywhere, none of the modern aerodynamic designs. She couldn't see any company logos, just plain colored cabs. Dark blue, forest green, burgundy red. No running lights, just the old-style clearance lights and headlights. No reflective tape, no modern safety features. Patricia pulled into the convoy's formation, settling in behind a dark blue Kenworth. She tried radioing the drivers. "Hey, good buddies, this is Lotus Flower. Nice convoy you've got here. What's the occasion?" For a long moment, only static answered. Then a man's voice came through, distant and warped, as if transmitted from very far away. "Just heading home, Lotus Flower. Been on the road a long time, a very long time." The voice sent shivers down her spine. There was something wrong with it, too hollow, like someone speaking from the bottom of a well. She tried again. "Where's home for you guys?" Another pause, then a different voice, this one crackling with interference. "We don't remember anymore, but we keep driving. That's what we do. Drive until we get there." Patricia felt her hands growing cold on the wheel. She looked at the truck ahead of her, really studied it. The license plate was from Nevada, but the registration stickers were dated 1983. The truck looked pristine, no rust, no wear, like it had just rolled off a showroom floor 40 years ago. That wasn't possible. She checked her mirrors. Behind her was a burgundy Peterbilt, equally pristine with plates dated 1979. Her headlights illuminated the rear of the Kenworth ahead, and she noticed something that made her stomach drop. The trailer doors had writing on them, hand-painted in white letters. "Jimmy Wade, 1952-1982, forever rolling." She stared at it, her breath coming faster. That was a memorial, like something you'd see on a grave. She looked at the other trucks she could see. Each one had similar writing, names, dates, memorial messages. Robert Chen, 1945-1978, gone but never stopped. Margaret Kowalski, 1938-1981, still hauling. All the dates were deaths, she realized, all from the 1970s and 1980s. Every single truck in this convoy was a rolling tombstone. Patricia grabbed her CB mic with shaking hands. "Who are you people? What is this?" The radio erupted with multiple voices talking over each other, all distorted, all wrong. "We're drivers just like you. Died on this road. Jackknifed in 79. Fell asleep and crossed the median in 82. Brake failure in 77. We never stopped driving. Can't stop. This is all we know. Join us. Join the convoy. Drive with us forever." She screamed and hit her brakes, slowing rapidly. The convoy continued ahead at the same steady speed, not reacting to her exit. As the last truck passed her, a forest green freightliner with Thomas Martin, 1941-1980, "The Road is Home," painted on its trailer. She saw the driver's face in the side mirror. It was a skull, covered in dried, leathery skin, wearing a trucker's cap, hands made of bone gripping the wheel. The entire convoy faded as she watched, not driving away, but simply becoming transparent, like ghosts in a movie, until they vanished completely. Patricia sat on the shoulder of Interstate 80, hyperventilating, her truck's flashers blinking. She was completely alone. The road stretched empty in both directions. She checked her dash cam footage later. The screen showed only an empty highway. The convoy didn't appear in the recording at all. She finished her delivery the next morning, badly shaken. When she researched later, she found records of multiple fatal truck accidents on that stretch of I-80 throughout the 1970s and 1980s. The names she'd seen painted on the trailers matched real drivers who died there. Jimmy Wade, jackknifed on black ice in 1982. Margaret Kowalski, head-on collision in 1981. Thomas Martin fell asleep at the wheel in 1980. Dozens of them over the years. Patricia still drives I-80, but she never travels that stretch between Winnemucca and Battle Mountain at night anymore. Other drivers have reported seeing the ghost convoy over the years. Always at night, always in the same area, always vintage trucks moving together in formation. Some say if you join them and don't leave before dawn, you become part of the convoy forever. Another name painted on another phantom trailer driving endlessly on a road that never ends. Story number 5, the cargo that breathed. Raymond Torres had been hauling freight for 22 years, mostly standard loads, consumer goods, automotive parts, construction materials. He'd seen it all and prided himself on being unflappable. In January 2019, he got a call for an unusual job, a rush delivery from a medical research facility in Colorado to a laboratory in Salt Lake City. The pay was triple his normal rate for a simple overnight haul. The only catch was he couldn't open the trailer or inspect the cargo. It was sealed and climate-controlled, and he was given strict instructions to maintain constant temperature and deliver within 8 hours. Raymond picked up the trailer at a nondescript facility outside Denver at 9:00 p.m. The loading was handled by staff in hazmat suits, which seemed excessive for medical supplies, but he'd transported pharmaceutical cargo before. Some of that stuff required serious protocols. They gave him a special monitoring device for the trailer's climate control and made him sign multiple liability waivers. The facility manager, a nervous woman with tight lips, told him, "Do not stop except for fuel. Do not open the trailer. If you hear anything unusual, ignore it. Just drive." That last instruction bothered him. Hear anything? What would I hear? She wouldn't meet his eyes. Just sounds. The cargo is sensitive. The containment systems sometimes make noise. It's normal. Just drive. For the first 2 hours, everything was fine. Raymond cruised west on Interstate 70, making good time through the mountains. The roads were clear, traffic lights, stars brilliant in the cold winter sky. Then around 11:30 p.m. he heard it. A thump from the trailer. Not the normal shifting of cargo, but a deliberate, heavy impact, like something striking the wall from inside. He checked his mirrors reflexively, but of course he couldn't see into the sealed trailer. Another thump, then another. They developed a rhythm. 3 thumps. Pause, 3 thumps, pause, like something knocking. Raymond's hands tightened on the wheel. He told himself it was just the cargo settling, equipment shifting, anything normal. But the knocking continued, and it seemed to be moving, progressing from the front of the trailer toward the rear, as if something were walking the length of the cargo area, striking the walls as it moved. Then he heard the breathing. At first he thought it was his own breath, amplified by anxiety. But no, it was coming, through the trailer. Somehow he could hear it through the walls, through the constant road noise, through everything. Deep, wet, rasping breaths, in and out, in and out. The rhythm was too slow for human breathing, each breath lasting maybe 10 seconds. Whatever was making that sound had lungs the size of barrels. Raymond grabbed his phone, thinking he'd call the facility, demand an explanation. Before he could dial, the phone rang. It was them. "Mr. Torres, we're monitoring the trailer. Everything is functioning normally. Continue to your destination. Do not stop." He stammered. "There's something alive in there. I can hear it breathing. What the hell is in my trailer?" "Classified medical research," the voice said, cold and clinical. "Your contract specifies no questions. Drive. You have 6 hours remaining. The containment is secure. You're in no danger as long as you keep moving." They hung up before he could respond. The breathing grew louder over the next hour. Raymond could feel it now, a vibration through his seat, through the frame of his truck. Each exhale seemed to push against the trailer walls. The thumping continued sporadically, sometimes knocking, sometimes what sounded like scratching, long scraping sounds like claws on metal. He tried turning up his radio to drown it out, but nothing helped. The sounds penetrated everything. Around 1:00 a.m., climbing through the Rockies, Raymond heard something new. A voice. It wasn't speaking English. It wasn't speaking any language he recognized. The sounds were guttural, wet, like someone trying to talk through a mouthful of mud. But there was intelligence in it, structure, rhythm. Whatever was in the trailer was trying to communicate. He almost stopped, almost pulled over and ran, leaving the truck and its cargo on the side of the highway. But he thought about the triple pay, about his mortgage, his daughter's college tuition. He kept driving, knuckles white on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road ahead, trying to ignore the increasingly frantic sounds from behind him. The worst moment came at 2:47 a.m. passing through a tunnel. In the enclosed space, the sounds amplified horribly. The breathing became a roar, the thumping turned to thunderous impacts that rocked his entire truck. The voice rose to a shriek, those inhuman words echoing off tunnel walls. Raymond screamed along with it, unable to stop himself, terror overwhelming every rational thought. Then he burst out of the tunnel into open air, and suddenly everything went silent. No breathing, no thumping, no voice. Just the normal road noise and his own ragged gasps. Raymond almost pulled over then, but he was terrified that stopping would make it start again. He drove the remaining 3 hours in absolute silence, flinching at every tiny sound, certain the nightmare would resume. It never did. He delivered the trailer to the Salt Lake City facility at 5:00 a.m. Staff in full hazmat suits unhooked it before he'd even turned off his engine. They worked with urgent efficiency, running scanners over the trailer, checking seals. Raymond approached the supervisor, demanding to know what he'd hauled. "You don't want to know," the man said, his face pale behind his face shield. "Trust me. Take your payment and forget this delivery." But Raymond didn't leave. He watched from a distance as they opened the trailer with extreme caution, multiple armed guards standing by. He couldn't see inside clearly, but he saw the crew's reactions. Several people vomiting, others backing away in horror. Something was carried out on a specialized gurney, covered completely, strapped down with what looked like industrial chains. It was roughly man-shaped but too large, maybe 7 or 8 feet long, and it moved under the restraints. He saw the covering rise and fall. It was breathing. Raymond took his payment, nearly $15,000 for one night's work. He's never accepted another medical transport job, no matter the pay. He's never told anyone the full story, afraid they'd think he was crazy or worse, that someone would make him sign confidentiality agreements retroactively. But he knows what he heard, something alive, something aware, something that should never have existed. And sometimes, late at night when he's sleeping in his cab, he wakes up certain he can still hear that breathing, that wet, rasping rhythm, coming from just beyond the thin metal walls. Story number 6. The Loop. Stephen Park had been driving for 9 years, specializing in Midwest routes, when he encountered something that made him question the basic nature of reality. It was June 2020, and he was hauling furniture from Minneapolis to Chicago on Interstate 94. A simple run he'd done at least 50 times before. He left at 11 p.m., planning to arrive by 7 a.m. The route was straightforward, just stay on I-94 through Wisconsin, straight shot all the way. Around 2 a.m., somewhere in rural Wisconsin between Menominee and Eau Claire, Stephen noticed something odd. He passed a distinctive water tower painted bright yellow with a smiley face, advertising a local diner. He'd never seen it before, but it was memorable. The smiley face was slightly wrong, asymmetrical, almost unsettling. 5 minutes later, he passed it again. The exact same water tower. Stephen frowned and checked his GPS. It showed him on I-94 heading southeast, as he should be, making normal progress. But there was that water tower again, the off-center smiley face grinning at him from the darkness. He told himself he must have been confused, maybe there were 2 similar towers. He kept driving, focused, alert. 10 minutes later, the water tower appeared again. Same exit sign beside it. Morrison Road, next right. Same distance markers, same everything. His stomach knotted with anxiety. He checked his odometer. He'd traveled 23 miles since first seeing the tower. but somehow he kept passing it. He drove more carefully now, watching for landmarks. There, a specific billboard advertising cheese with a picture of a smiling cow. A mile later, a rest area with a blue roof. Another mile, a bridge over a small river. Then the water tower again, followed by the cheese billboard, the rest area, the bridge, in the exact same sequence. He was looping. Somehow, impossibly, he was driving the same stretch of highway over and over. Stephen pulled over at the rest area, hands shaking. He got out of his truck, walked around, trying to ground himself in reality. The rest area looked normal. Bathrooms, vending machines, a few picnic tables. Empty at this hour. He checked his phone. The time showed 2:43 a.m. His GPS insisted he was making progress toward Chicago, showing him 247 miles from his destination. He got back in his truck and continued driving, convinced he'd just been tired, seeing things. But 12 minutes later, there was the water tower. The smiley face seemed to be mocking him now. The billboard, the rest area, the bridge, the same sequence. He grabbed his logbook and started marking each time he passed the water tower. 2:55 a.m., 3:07 a.m., 3:19 a.m., 3:31 a.m. Every 12 minutes, the loop repeated exactly. Stephen tried different approaches. He floored the accelerator, pushing his rig up to 90 miles per hour. The loop took 8 minutes instead of 12. He drove at 40 miles per hour. The loop took 20 minutes, but it always looped. He tried taking the Morrison Road exit. The off-ramp curved away from the highway, and Stephen followed it, hopeful. The road led through dark farmland for about 2 miles, then curved back and deposited him right back onto I-94, just before the water tower. He screamed in frustration. Around 4:30 a.m., after passing the water tower at least 20 times, Stephen saw another vehicle. A pickup truck was parked on the shoulder, flashers blinking. A man stood beside it, waving frantically. Stephen should have kept driving, but he was desperate for human contact, proof he wasn't completely losing his mind. He pulled over. The man ran up to Stephen's window. He was in his 30s, eyes wild with panic. "Thank God, you're real. I've been trapped here for hours. I keep driving the same section over and over, that fucking water tower." Stephen's relief at finding someone else evaporated, replaced by deeper terror. "How long have you been here?" The man checked his phone. "I entered this highway at midnight. It's been, Jesus, almost 5 hours. How long for you?" Stephen told him 2.5 hours. They compared notes frantically. They were experiencing the exact same loop. Water tower, billboard, rest area, bridge, repeat. The man had tried everything Stephen had tried with the same results. "What's happening to us? Is this some kind of hallucination? Carbon monoxide?" Stephen didn't have answers. They decided to drive together, the pickup following Stephen's semi. Maybe having 2 vehicles would break the pattern somehow. It didn't. They looped together 3 more times. Stephen watched the pickup in his mirrors, proof he wasn't alone, which somehow made it worse. This wasn't a hallucination. This was real. They were genuinely trapped in a geographic impossibility. At 5:47 a.m., dawn starting to lighten the eastern horizon, something changed. Stephen passed the water tower again, but this time there was a car parked beneath it. An old sedan, maybe from the 1980s, covered in rust. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat. As Stephen drove past, the figure turned to look at him. Even from the highway, even in the dim pre-dawn light, Stephen could see the person's face was wrong. Features blurred and indistinct, like a photograph someone had smudged before it dried. The pickup truck behind him started honking frantically. Stephen looked in his mirror and watched in horror as the pickup swerved violently, as if avoiding something. Then it straightened out and continued following him. They passed the billboard, the rest area, the bridge. When they came to the water tower again, the rusty sedan was gone. At exactly 6 a.m., as full sunlight broke over the horizon, Stephen felt something shift. He couldn't explain what changed, but it was like passing through a membrane, a subtle transition. He drove forward, and the water tower didn't appear again. New scenery replaced it. Different farms, different exits, normal progression of the highway. The pickup truck behind him flashed its lights in celebration. They pulled over at the next real rest area, 15 miles down the road. The other driver was crying with relief. They checked their vehicles thoroughly. Everything was normal. No mechanical issues, no explanation. Their phones showed they'd lost 6 hours, but their GPS log showed impossible mileage. Stephen's truck had somehow traveled 400 miles while trapped in that 12-mile loop. Stephen made his delivery that morning 5 hours late. He couldn't explain what happened. The company docked his pay for the delay. Stephen has driven I-94 through Wisconsin dozens of times since then, always during daylight. He's never found that stretch with the yellow water tower with the wrong smiley face. He's looked on Google Maps, studied every water tower along the route. It doesn't exist, but he has his logbook marked with all those times. 2:55 a.m., 3:07 a.m., 3:19 a.m., on and on. Proof that for 6 hours one night in June, the road stopped making sense and time turned into a circle he couldn't escape. Story number 7. The Rest Stop Visitors. Angela Martinez had worked as a team driver with her partner for 11 years before deciding to try solo long haul in late 2019. She enjoyed the solitude but found the overnight rest periods unsettling. Parked in dark truck stops, alone in her cab, surrounded by other trucks but feeling isolated. In November 2019, she was hauling paper products from Georgia to Pennsylvania, taking her required 10-hour break at a rest area on Interstate 81 in Virginia. She parked around 11:00 p.m. in a well-lit section, several other trucks nearby but not too close. She went through her normal routine, ate a quick dinner, brushed her teeth, checked her doors were locked, set her alarm for 7 a.m. She climbed into her sleeper berth, pulled the curtain closed, and settled in. The gentle idle of her engine and the occasional sound of other trucks moving in and out created a familiar rhythm. She fell asleep easily. She woke suddenly at 2:17 a.m. to the sound of tapping on her driver's side window. 3 deliberate taps, knuckles on glass. Angela's heart raced immediately. That was never good. She kept her curtain closed and called out, "Go away! I'm calling the cops." The tapping repeated. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. She grabbed her phone, ready to dial 911, and crept forward to peek through the curtain gap. A woman stood beside her truck. She wore a dress that looked decades out of fashion. Pale blue with a white collar, like something from the 1950s. Her hair was styled in an old-fashioned way, perfectly curled. She was looking directly at Angela, even though Angela was certain she couldn't be seen through the narrow curtain gap. The woman raised her hand and tapped 3 more times. Her face was expressionless, blank, like a mannequin. "What do you want?" Angela shouted through the window, not opening it. The woman's mouth moved, but no sound came through the glass. She was saying something, repeating the same words over and over, but Angela couldn't hear. The woman pointed toward the back of Angela's trailer, then to the trucks parked nearby, then to the rest area building. The gestures were urgent, but her face remained blank, no emotion at all. Angela fumbled with her phone and called 911, reporting a suspicious person. While she was on the call, describing the woman she watched through the curtain. The woman turned and walked away, her movements odd, too smooth, almost gliding. She approached another truck parked 3 spaces down and started tapping on that driver's window, the same 3-tap pattern. Within 10 minutes, a state trooper arrived. Angela climbed out of her cab, grateful for the protection. She pointed to where she'd seen the woman, but there was no one there now. The trooper walked around the area with his flashlight, checking between trucks. "There's no one here, ma'am. You sure you saw someone?" Angela insisted she had. Described the woman in detail. The vintage dress, the blank expression, the odd way she moved. The trooper's demeanor changed. His face got serious. "Wait here." He walked to the other truck the woman had approached and knocked on the door. The driver, a heavy-set man in his 50s, opened his door looking annoyed. The trooper spoke with him briefly, then returned to Angela, his expression troubled. "Ma'am, that driver says no one knocked on his window. Tonight, he's been awake the whole time working on his logbook. Didn't see or hear anything." That made no sense. Angela had watched the woman approach that exact truck and knock on it. She started to protest, but the trooper cut her off. "Ma'am, I need to ask you something. This woman you saw, you said she wore a pale blue dress with a white collar, hair curled in an old style?" Angela nodded. The trooper sighed heavily. "Come with me." He led her to the rest area building, currently closed and dark, and shined his flashlight on a memorial plaque mounted on the wall. The plaque commemorated a bus accident that had occurred at this location in 1956. A Greyhound bus had crashed, killing 17 passengers. The plaque listed their names. Below the text was a black and white photograph of some of the victims taken before the trip. Angela's blood went cold. Third from the left was the woman she'd seen. Same dress, same hairstyle, same face captured in that 1956 photograph. "You're not the first driver to report seeing her," the trooper said quietly. "Happens every few months, always between 2 and 3 a.m., always the same description. She taps on windows, tries to tell people something, then disappears. We don't know what she wants. Some people think she's trying to warn drivers about the dangerous curve half a mile north where the bus crashed. Some think she's just stuck here, repeating her last moments." Angela felt sick. "I saw a ghost? That's what you're telling me?" The trooper shrugged. "I'm telling you you're not crazy and you're not alone. It happens. This stretch of I-81 has a lot of history, a lot of accidents. Sometimes things don't stay buried properly. My advice? Get some rest if you can, or leave now if you can't. She doesn't hurt anyone. She just visits." Angela couldn't possibly sleep after that. She started her engine and left immediately, still having 7 hours left on her required rest period. She drove until she found another rest area 50 miles north and finished her break there. But as she was leaving, pulling back onto the highway, she passed the curve where the 1956 bus accident had occurred. There was a historical marker, flowers placed recently, memorial crosses. And standing beside the road, barely visible in her headlights, was the woman in the pale blue dress. She was waving, a desperate gesture, trying to flag Angela down. Angela kept driving, pressing the accelerator, putting distance between herself and that place. In her mirror, she saw the woman growing smaller, still waving, still trying to deliver whatever warning or message she'd been trying to communicate for 63 years. Angela has driven I-81 many times since then, but she refuses to stop at that particular rest area. Other drivers have told her similar stories, the tapping woman, always in that vintage dress, always between 2 and 3 a.m. Some say if you stop and actually open your window, actually listen to what she's saying, you can hear her warning. "Don't take the curve too fast. The road is bad there. Please don't take the curve too fast." The same warning she probably tried to give her bus driver in 1956, moments before the crash. But by then it was too late, and now she's trapped there, trying to save people who can never quite understand what she's desperately trying to say, night after night, year after year, forever. Story number 8. The Broadcast. Derek Walsh had been an independent owner-operator for 14 years, hauling various freight across the western states. In August 2021, he was driving through New Mexico on Highway 54, a lonely stretch between Alamogordo and Carrizozo, transporting agricultural equipment. It was 1 a.m., no other traffic, just empty desert under a vast canopy of stars. His CB radio had been quiet for hours, unusual for Derek, who usually kept it on channel 19 to catch chatter from other drivers, even if it was just for company. At 1:47 a.m., his radio suddenly activated on its own, switching from channel 19 to channel 8, which was almost never used. Static blasted from the speaker, then a voice emerged. Not speaking, chanting. A low rhythmic chant in a language Derek didn't recognize. It sounded ancient, guttural, with harsh consonants and elongated vowels. The voice was male, deep, and there was something wrong with it, something that made Derek's skin crawl. It sounded like multiple voices layered over each other, not quite in sync. Derek reached for the radio to change the channel back. The moment his fingers touched the dial, the chanting stopped. A different voice spoke, clear and direct. Derek Walsh. Keep driving, don't stop, don't look back, they're following. Derek jerked his hand back as if the radio had burned him. The voice knew his name. How the hell did it know his name? Who is this? How do you know my name? Derek grabbed the microphone, but before he could transmit, the voice continued. Highway 54, northbound, mile marker 127, you're hauling farm equipment. A combine harvester and irrigation parts. You left Alamogordo at 11:30 p.m. You stopped for fuel at 12:45 a.m. You bought a coffee and a candy bar. You're alone. Every detail was correct. Derek's heart hammered against his ribs. He checked his mirrors frantically. The road behind him was empty, just his own taillights reflecting off the asphalt. No other vehicles. What do you want? Who's following me? The voice didn't answer. The chanting resumed, louder now, more urgent. Multiple voices, dozens maybe, all chanting those strange words in unison. Then Derek saw lights in his mirror, high up, too high for a normal vehicle. They moved in an odd pattern, swaying slightly like they were floating rather than traveling on the road. They were gaining on him fast, impossibly fast. Derek pressed the accelerator, pushing his rig up to 75. The lights kept pace, closing the distance. They weren't headlights, he realized. They glowed with a pale blue luminescence, cold and unnatural. The radio chanting reached a crescendo, then cut off abruptly. The first voice returned, no longer calm, now frantic. Faster, Derek, don't let them catch you. They want what you're carrying, not the cargo. They want you. Derek was doing 80 now, his truck shaking, the load rattling dangerously. The lights were maybe 100 yards behind him, close enough that he could see they weren't attached to any vehicle. They hung in the air, pulsing rhythmically, 4 of them arranged in a diamond pattern. What are they? Derek screamed into the microphone. The voice crackled back, breaking up. Old things, hungry things, been here since before the roads. They hunt travelers. Usually they take people on foot, but sometimes they chase vehicles. You triggered something back at mile marker 109. There's a place there, an old place, sacred ground disturbed. You drove through it, now they know you, now they hunt. Derek couldn't see mile marker 109 in his memory, couldn't remember anything unusual. Just empty highway. The lights behind him suddenly spread out, 2 moving left, 2 moving right, flanking him. They were herding him. Derek glanced at his GPS frantically. The nearest town was Carrizozo, still 38 miles ahead. He'd never make it. The lights were so close now he could see shapes between them. Dark forms that hurt to look at, geometry that didn't make sense, angles that bent wrong. What do I do? He shouted. The radio voice was barely audible through interference. The old reservation border, mile marker 141. Sacred ground they can't cross, 4 miles ahead. Drive faster, don't stop. The transmission dissolved into static and that horrible chanting. Derek could hear the chanting outside his truck now, not just on the radio. It surrounded him, came from the desert itself, from the darkness beyond his headlights. The lights rushed forward. One pulled alongside his driver's door, keeping perfect pace with him. Derek made the mistake of looking directly at it. The light was a window, or a doorway, or something his mind couldn't properly categorize. Through it he saw things. Figures that had too many limbs, faces that were all eyes, mouths that opened in wrong directions. They reached toward him, translucent appendages pressing against the window like they were trying to push through glass that didn't really exist. Derek couldn't breathe. His vision tunneled. He was going to crash, going to die, right here on this empty highway in the middle of the New Mexico desert. Then he saw the sign. Mile marker 141. He crossed some invisible threshold and everything changed. The lights vanished instantly like someone had flipped a switch. The chanting stopped. His CB radio went silent. The darkness pressed in, but it was normal darkness now. Just the absence of light, not the living darkness that had been pursuing him. Derek pulled over a mile later, shaking so violently he couldn't keep the truck steady. He sat on the shoulder for 20 minutes, engine running, doors locked, lights on, too terrified to move. His CB radio suddenly crackled back to life, returning to channel 19 on its own. A normal voice came through, another trucker passing by, checking if Derek needed help. Derek managed to say he was fine, just taking a break. He drove the rest of the night without stopping, didn't rest until he was 200 miles away, in a busy truck stop surrounded by people and lights and normal reality. He told himself it was some kind of mass hallucination, maybe contaminated coffee causing the visions. But his truck's dash cam was running that night. When he reviewed the footage later, it showed the lights clearly. 4 pale blue orbs pursuing his truck, flanking him, keeping pace. And in the split second before they vanished at mile marker 141, the camera captured shapes between the lights. Forms that made Derek immediately delete the footage because he knew if he kept it, if he looked at it again, he'd never sleep again. Derek still drives Highway 54 sometimes. Freight needs to be delivered, routes are routes. But he always makes sure to drive through that area during full daylight, and he never ever stops between mile markers 109 and 141. And he keeps his CB radio turned off on that stretch because sometimes, even in daylight, it will activate on its own and switch to channel 8. And he'll hear that chanting again, faint but distinct, like something is still trying to reach him from a place he barely escaped. Story number 9, The Way Station. Carl Henderson was a veteran driver with 26 years of experience, hauling everything from lumber to livestock across North America. In September 2022, he was transporting electronics from California to Oregon on Interstate 5, a route he'd driven hundreds of times. Around 3 a.m., approaching the Oregon border, he saw the familiar signs for an upcoming way station. All commercial vehicles must stop when lights flashing. The lights were flashing. Carl sighed. He hated delays, but regulations were regulations. He guided his truck off the highway and onto the way station approach. Something felt off immediately. The station looked different from how he remembered it. Older somehow, more run down. The paint on the buildings was faded and some of the lights were flickering, but it was 3 a.m. and Carl was tired. He rolled up to the scale. A figure in a uniform emerged from the station office and waved him onto the scale. Carl complied, parking carefully on the massive platform. The scale's digital display was dark, unusual, but maybe the equipment was being serviced. The uniformed officer approached his window. Carl rolled it down and handed over his logbook, registration, and commercial license, the usual routine. The officer looked wrong. Carl couldn't pinpoint exactly what was off, but everything about the man seemed slightly incorrect. His uniform was an older style, the kind that hadn't been used in 20 years. His face was expressionless, movements stiff and mechanical. He examined Carl's documents without speaking, then handed them back and pointed toward the station building. "Park over there. Inspection required." Carl's stomach sank. Random inspections could take hours, but arguing with way station officers never went well. He parked where indicated, grabbed his paperwork, and walked to the building. The door was heavy, metal, the kind that belonged on an industrial freezer. Inside, the office was dimly lit by old fluorescent tubes that hummed loudly. The furniture was decades out of date. Metal desks, ancient filing cabinets, a coffee maker that looked like it was from the 1970s. 3 more officers sat in the room, all with that same wrong quality. Expressionless faces, stiff movements, uniforms from the wrong era. One of them gestured to a chair. "Sit, we have questions." Carl sat, increasingly uneasy. "Look, my paperwork's all in order. Cargo's secure, I've got delivery deadlines." "You're hauling electronics," one officer interrupted. "Samsung televisions, 48 units, destination Portland warehouse." Carl nodded. That was all correct. "We need to inspect the cargo." Carl protested. "It's sealed. I've got the manifest right here. Everything's documented." The officer stood. "We need to inspect. Follow." They led Carl outside to his trailer. One officer produced a bolt cutter and approached the seal. "Wait!" Carl objected. "You can't just cut that. There are procedures. I need authorization from my dispatcher." The officer ignored him and cut the seal. The trailer doors swung open. Inside was not Carl's cargo. The trailer was empty except for a single object in the center. A large wooden crate, maybe 6 feet long, 3 feet wide, 3 feet tall. It was old, covered in strange symbols carved into the wood. Carl stared in confusion. "That's not... Where's my cargo? Those were 55-inch televisions, 48 boxes. Where did they go?" The officers surrounded the crate, examining it without touching. One spoke in a monotone. "The cargo has always been this. You have been transporting this. You agreed to transport this." Carl's mind reeled. "No. I loaded televisions in Riverside. I watched them load the trailer. I have the manifest." He pulled out his manifest paperwork. The document had changed. The cargo description now read, "One sealed container. Contents classified. Handle with extreme caution. Do not open under any circumstances." Carl's hands shook. That wasn't what the manifest had said when he left California. He'd read it himself. Electronics, televisions. This was impossible. One of the officers opened a laptop, or what looked like a laptop, but the design was wrong, too sleek, too advanced, not quite matching any technology Carl recognized. The screen displayed what appeared to be his entire route, tracked in real time with timestamps and locations. But there were other routes shown too, dozens of them overlapping his path. Other drivers, other transports, all converging on this way station at different times. "You were selected," the officer said. "The cargo chooses its transporters. You have carried it successfully to this checkpoint. Your service is complete." Carl backed away. "I don't understand any of this. I want to leave. I'm calling my dispatcher." He reached for his phone. It was dead. Completely drained, even though it had been at 70% charge 5 minutes ago. The officers moved toward the crate. They opened it carefully, reverently, and Carl caught a glimpse inside. The contents were impossible to describe clearly. His mind refused to process what he was seeing. Organic, but not organic. Metallic, but not metallic. It moved without moving. It was a color that wasn't a color. Looking at it made Carl's head pound and his stomach twist. He stumbled backward, bile rising in his throat. "Do not look directly at the cargo," one officer commanded. They closed the crate. You will leave now. You will remember transporting electronics. Your manifest will be correct. Your cargo will be intact when you reach Portland. This station does not exist. You did not stop here. Carl felt dizzy. The officers guided him back to his truck, moving him like a puppet. He climbed into his cab in a daze. One officer leaned close to his window. Drive. Deliver your cargo. Speak of this to no one. If you speak, we will come for you. The cargo has many routes, many drivers. You are one thread in a vast pattern. Stay silent and the pattern remains undisturbed. Break silence and the pattern breaks you. Carl drove. He pulled back onto Interstate 5, his mind foggy and confused. 5 minutes later, he passed the actual Oregon Way station, the familiar, well-maintained station he'd been through dozens of times before. The lights weren't flashing. He continued without stopping, trying to piece together what had just happened. Had he stopped somewhere else? Had there been another way station? He checked his GPS log later. It showed no stops, no detours. He'd driven straight through without pausing. His electronic logbook confirmed it, no stop recorded, but he remembered it clearly. The wrong officers, the crate with the impossible contents, the threats. He checked his trailer seal when he stopped for fuel at dawn. It was intact, uncut, the original seal number matching his paperwork. His cargo manifest showed electronics exactly as it should. When he reached Portland and opened the trailer, 48 boxes of Samsung televisions were there, properly secured exactly as described. No crate, no strange symbols, everything normal. Carl delivered the load and said nothing to anyone. But sometimes, late at night, when he's driving empty stretches of highway, he sees the signs for way stations that don't exist on any map. All commercial vehicles must stop when lights flashing. The lights are always flashing, but Carl has never stopped at one again. He's terrified that if he does, he'll find out what cargo he's really transporting. What he's always been transporting without knowing, as one thread in a pattern so vast and terrible that seeing the whole of it would shatter his mind. So he drives past, ignoring the signs, breaking regulations for the first time in his career, because some rules exist to keep you safe, and some rules exist to trap you in something far worse than punishment. And Carl can never be certain which kind of rule he's breaking until it's far, far too late.